Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. Time for another show. Happy anniversary to myself. Just me, though. I gotta make it sound like it's just me. I'm married, and I have a production assistant partner. Unnamed as to this point, because Republicans are crazy, and you never know when they may try to hunt people down and kill them because they get on the radio and say things they don't like. So we just say happy anniversary to us here in the kitchen of Kagro and Morning World headquarters. It's the 25th anniversary of our wedding, so it's like a big deal, and something in silver, I guess, right? We all to go out and get any silver, or people want to give us, you can Patreon us some silver, I guess. And thank you very much to Justice, who says congrats in the background, as I'm sure you all did. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. It won't affect the news very much because, well, I don't know. We're not royals or anything like that. And so, well, we'll do our best with that. And of course, me being on the radio and her being at work basically means, well, we got to wait until later in order to do anything. And there's COVID out there. So who wants to do anything? Okay, that's basically it for what's going on the home front. Plenty going on around the country and around the world. Lots happening in news, happening on Twitter, people making interesting comments that we want to pay attention to and go on from there. As a matter of fact, the morning has been pretty interesting and active. Not in terms of brand new news. All the really good stuff happened yesterday evening and was reported then, with a few new stories circulating earlier this morning. But we'll wait to catch up on those things and catch up instead on what people are gossiping about on Twitter first, I guess. I just happened to see a very interesting comment from Adam Serwer that everybody is enjoying this morning. Very frequently shared sentiment here, the way he puts it, and Adam puts things so well. We went from free speech activist to the state must ban dangerous ideas, almost as fast as we went from immigration is bad because Fern, you know how it's pronounced, Fern workers, to press wages, to higher wages for workers are bad because my burrito at Chipotle is 15 cents more. Yes, I know, you kind of have to be tuned in to the meme of the moment in order to grasp all of that, perhaps, but most of you actually are. So it'll probably work just fine. And I was just thinking about how quickly, I mean, this is not news that Republicans, who are really basically gimmitarians, flip-flop between memes of the day or memes of the moment as soon as it's convenient for them. Of course, I was reminded from his comment of back in the early pandemic days when Republicans, much slower, it took many more years for them to do this. This is, of course, Adam's comment is about the speed with which they're flip-flopping, but I was just thinking of how in the early days of the pandemic, things went from, let's see, like the Terry Schiavo Republicans. Remember that? The whole incident about, well, got to preserve life at all costs, and you can't take her off of the ventilator, et cetera, et cetera. And that same party became the FU, no ventilators for your whole state unless you kiss Trump's ass party. And that was kind of interesting. But that took so much longer than these flip-flops on free speech advocacy, etc. That was, of course, the excuse that Republicans used to do everything from protesting the outcome of the election to the fact that they were supposed to wear masks to the fact that COVID was a real disease, etc., etc. It's just sort of an interesting observation for this morning. There are more direct impacts of that observation, and that too was part of the theme of the morning, as I happened by quite a few people discussing the same thing here. Ben Collins tweeting this morning, among other people, or perhaps people sharing his tweet, noting the race in local school boards to freak out about so-called critical race theory, and it's become like the latest. People have been comparing it to all sorts of things. The latest, the moral panic, the old satanic panic thing that the school boards went through back in the 80s and has been brought up a couple of times in a similar context lately, and I can't even remember what we were comparing the satanic panic to at the time. But I guess this is the outgrowth of the Republican outrage of the day machine, which we discussed a few days ago is just basically, well, everybody's an independent contractor in this, and all the Republican operatives and media outlets just throw whatever they can at the wall, and whatever sticks, they just let everybody know. I'm getting traction with this made-up complaint today. That will be our outrage of the day. Critical race theory, I think they believe has been a tremendous success for them. Ben Collins here tweeting, it's a short thread promoting an article on the subject at NBC News, but Ben tweeting here, exclusive from me and Tyler Kincaid. I'm just reading their Twitter handles now. We'll get to it when we read the story. Is critical race theory taking over your school board? And if it hasn't, you should check again, not because we want it to, but because it probably actually has and you haven't noticed it, because not a whole lot of people pay attention to what their school board is doing. I usually don't either. I just happen to note for the record that the Loudoun County School Board was in fact fighting over this and a few other things because they were very closely mirroring the outrage machine game, and also because we're close to Washington, D.C. It made it into the national level newspapers via the Washington Post that our school board was in fact fighting over banning critical race theory from being taught in our high schools. And I believe, as we mentioned the other day, I think it's basically best described, if there is even a course that's actually taught in it, as opposed to just one subject that a certain type of course would cover. It's a college and graduate and postgraduate level inquiry, really. It's not a primary school inquiry. It doesn't really enter into the curriculum very often in public schools. But basically, Ben Collins tweeting, is critical race theory taking over your school board? This national organization could be why. Perhaps we ought to read that. He follows it up with this tweet, which I saw. If these extremely vicious viral videos and Fox News clips about critical race theory seem a little national, there's a reason for it. Groups like No Left Turn are helping push a record number of school board recalls, sharing tactics, lawyers, and cash. And there's a little screen grab of one of the pull quotes from the piece. I didn't understand this until recently, but these were tactics from national organizations to discredit the entire district, quoting someone's superintendent somewhere, Jeff Porter. I guess if we read the article, we'll figure out where he is superintendent. But it occurred to me that this, too, led to a couple of other thoughts. One, again, going back to my own thoughts randomly expressed on Twitter over the years, that this is sort of easily observed, at least in my area. Although I always used to wonder whether it was, if not exclusive to our area, that perhaps we were more prone to it in our area. Because one thing I've noticed, I mean, really, for decades living out here, was that when Republicans ran for local elected office, county board of supervisors, school board, etc. I mean, not quite down to the level of running for soil and water conservation district representative, but almost. But Republicans tended to run very nationalized campaigns for local office, by which I mean you would have people running for county board of supervisor, even school board, on the platform that they were going to do something somehow about abortion from this position. Even if it was something, instantly recognizable on its face by normal people as useless. For instance, running for school board saying, I am going to introduce a resolution forbidding the school board from the use of any of its funds for the promotion of abortion, or for allowing school board employees to use their employer-provided health benefits to seek an abortion. Or they would try and engineer a way to make it relevant to school board or county supervisor board business, but it was, manufactured and contrived, but that was their platform. That is just kind of what they did. And it was, I wondered whether that was because, at the time that I noticed it, we had, what was the name of that kook? I can't remember. We had a woman who successfully ran for county board of supervisors. I think she did one term, who was, I think her chief occupation was she was some sort of an assistant, I don't know of what her title was, but an assistant to Phyllis Schlafly, essentially, and running Eagle Forum, and, arch conservative wacko, and she was looking to get into electoral politics because that's what they do. And I wondered whether, she deals in national politics all the time, she works for this national figure, and so maybe she just, that's what interests her, so that's how she was going to run for this position. But I noticed that a lot of other Republicans were doing it too. And she was in and out in one term, as I mentioned. But I thought that perhaps our proximity to the national capital and the fact that so many people here might work in the federal government or in close proximity or somehow, one off from the federal government and pay a lot of attention to national issues, and that those issues might resonate with our residents, maybe that accounted for it. But as it turns out, it's just kind of a national thing, or at least has become one, if it wasn't the fact that it was always the case. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of an interesting phenomenon. And now, of course, we see that these things are happening everywhere and still happening here as our own school board gets consumed in a critical race theory fight. But also something that got national attention was we locally had a gym teacher in an elementary school gym teacher who made a stink about, refusing to call kids by their chosen pronouns. You know how this goes now. Not that I thought a lot of this. What struck me as weird was I doubted that a whole lot of this was going on in elementary school, or at least their elementary school. But, it can happen anywhere, of course. And I just didn't think there was a whole lot of call probably for this one particular phys ed teacher in an elementary school to do anything with pronouns that was really going to interrupt their day. But he made a big stink about it and made it into a national story. They suspended him. He fought the suspension. They've unsuspended him. And again, this happened in close proximity to the national capital, so it made it into the Washington Post, and now it's a story. So, similarly, I guess this is happening everywhere, and I shouldn't be surprised to find it in our own district. But let me turn to let's pull up the NBC News article here, because I've seen it widely shared. I've noticed the graphic that they have used for it, and seen that being tweeted around. Critical race theory invades school boards with help from conservative groups, NBC News reports. In towns nationwide, well-connected conservative activists and Fox News have ramped up the tension in fights over race and equity in schools. So now we can finally get to the byline on these things. Tyler Kincaid, that's I don't know, I've never seen it spelled that way. I've seen Kincaid, but never with the G in there, but there it is. Brandy Zadrozny and Ben Collins, the aforementioned Ben Collins, datelined today, so 4:30 a.m. Were these people really up for this? I have a feeling they finished this last night. All right, going to get to first a sip of the hot tea for just a moment. I've been missing out on this, holding this mug for 15 minutes, saying, I'll just wait till he pauses and have a sip then. And then it was at that moment that I realized I'm the him. So, and not that I could get the gym teacher to say that, but you get the idea. A booby-trapped billboard is how this thing starts. I never heard of such a thing. A list of demands, a conservative media frenzy. I guess that's supposed to set the mood somehow. Jeff Porter, now we find out, superintendent of a wealthy suburban school district in Maine. Hi, Bill. Is this one of your school districts? Do you know about this thing? I forgot. Now this reminds me I haven't read Bill's morning tweet, but perhaps we'll put that aside as we don't understand where we're going to be going with the show. And so I gave no hint to Bill, and that's reflected in the morning tweet. He don't know either. And now we do know, and we should just stick with it. All right, so just an acknowledgement. Hi, Bill. How are you? Do you know about Jeff Porter? He's the superintendent of a wealthy suburban school district in Maine, and had no idea that his community was about to become part of a national battle in the summer of 2020. In the summer of 2020, a father began accusing the district of trying to, quote, indoctrinate his children by teaching critical race theory. Wow, summer of 2020. It didn't come out of nowhere. To Porter, the issue was straightforward. The district had denounced white supremacy in the wake of George Floyd's murder by police, but did not teach critical race theory, which, as it turns out, is the academic study of racism's pervasive impact. Which, I think we all kind of gleaned from the conversation. But I will say this, too, the last week or two, probably more, has been consumed with people saying, I'm so angry about all of these idiots who are going to the school board criticizing critical race theory and insisting that we not teach it, and they can't even define what it is. Ha! Hilarious. And then I realized, of course, I am not sure I can either, but I have an inkling, but so do they. But my inkling is better than theirs, most likely. Okay. Anyway, really the point is, of course, if it's not being taught in the school district, then there's no issue. But you know how it is with Republicans, especially with their conspiracy theories and paranoia. If they show up at one of these meetings and say, we demand that critical race theory not be taught in our school district, and the school district says, okay, you win. It won't be, because it never has been, and we're not considering it, and it doesn't belong in our curriculum because it's a much more advanced study than we would ever cover. They, essentially say, aha, that's exactly what you would try to say to me if you were trying to cover up that critical race theory really was being taught. And I assume somewhere in this article they make mention of the fact, you've probably seen reported somewhere, that it was at least, rumored. I saw it. I saw it on Twitter, so it's definitely true. Never tracked it down. But the rumor was that where was it? I think I actually remember the mention of Washoe County, which I don't know where that is, actually, or whether I'm pronouncing it correctly, where the parents were reportedly onto all of the schemes of the school board when the school board said, well, we're not teaching critical race theory and we won't. It's just not appropriate, but okay, also because you demand it, we won't. And the parents said, how do we know you really won't? And somebody proposed that the teachers ought to wear body cameras like police so that they could monitor the video to make sure that no one was teaching critical race theory. And of course, I guess that's where the problem arises of people not necessarily being able to define or identify critical race theory even when they see it. If we were to grant you this crazy idea, like suppose you sat there reviewing video from body cams from teachers, like how would you know how to identify critical race theory? Basically, like if somebody says something like, I don't know, if they mention race at all, they're teaching the Civil War and slavery, and they begin talking about African Americans being enslaved. That's racist. That must be critical race theory. Stop that right now. And I mean, if you're just dealing with a bunch of crazy parents, how do you convince them that that's not critical race theory? They want to say it is. All right, let's see. Back to the organized thoughts at NBC News. All right, so where were we? We were defining critical race theory as being that academic study of racism's pervasive impact. But the parent in suburban Maine here, Sean, McBrarity, perhaps? I think that's my best guess. Sean McBrarity grew increasingly disgruntled and soon connected with No Left Turn in Education, a rapidly growing national group that supports parents as they fight against lessons on systemic racism. We don't want anyone to find out about racism causing problems, because that way, I don't know, if we ignore it, it'll go away, I guess. But they don't even really want it to go away. That's another problem. That action turned a heated conflict with the school board into one that soon drew national attention. Mobilized by a new, increasingly coordinated movement with the backing of major conservative organizations and media outlets. It's a movement that has amped up grassroots parental organizing around the country, bringing the lens and stakes of national politics, along with the playbook of seasoned GOP activists, to school boards. I was very naive at the beginning of the year, Porter said. I thought it was a concerned parent who had taken it a little too far. I didn't understand this until recently, but these were tactics from national organizations to discredit the entire district, and really every district everywhere. By the way, the other thought that occurred to me in all of this is how often I have seen Rachel Bidikofer, and I think, reasonably, call for the nationalization of democratic elections, or democratic efforts in elections, I guess. Nationalization of themes and platforms and agendas and ideas, etc. But I think she offered it in a slightly different meaning to it, basically saying that when Republicans ran locally for Congress, for seats in the federal legislature, they almost always ran a national campaign, that is to say, basically cookie cutter campaign, that no matter where you were running against, Nancy Pelosi, and we got to stop Nancy Pelosi and her socialist agenda and San Francisco values, et cetera, et cetera. Not always a terribly effective campaign, but it's easy. It's another version of our own campaign in a box, basically. But she was always calling for Democrats to learn that lesson and perhaps try some of that, and that it worked fairly well. Republicans have since morphed it or, evolved the thing into something that you can even do on the school board level. And I don't know whether Rachel Bidikofer would advocate doing the same, maybe, under the guise of fighting fire with fire. But it is pretty interesting. I mean, it's stupid and inapplicable to these local races, but it works because, of course, you've seen anger about critical race theory on Fox News, so it resonates with local Republican voters, and even, they're not going to stop and think, oh, there's no critical race theory being taught in my school. This is ridiculous. They're just posing and making up this issue. If they're watching Fox News, they believe this stuff. And even if they never got any inkling and never really believed that anyone was trying to teach it in their schools, they would just say, I know what that's about. That makes sense to me, and they'd gravitate towards it. Whereas the poor Democrat who's running on, well, I've actually analyzed the school budget line by line, and I know how to bring it under control, or how to get more for our money, or how to do better with our teachers, or what have you. And that's, boring, egghead stuff. Wait, I actually have that sound effect somewhere.
Boring!
Right, exactly. No one is interested in that. And it doesn't drive people out to the polls, and people don't feel obligated to show up for the school board elections. But the Republicans are whipped into a frenzy over the possibility that national, specter that they heard about on Fox News or One America News, God forbid, or Newsmax or something worse, it's happening here. Oh, now I know what I'm supposed to be fighting against. And they show up, and the idiot who has no idea how to be a local school board member wins on the national premise of this nonsense. I don't know. I'm not sure how Rachel Bidikofer approaches that aspect of it, but it came to mind. And if I didn't tell you what came to mind, well, then I would just tell you to read this NBC News article for yourself, and what fun would that be? In the meantime, we haven't gotten through it, and we're almost at our first break. But at least you're getting the idea. All right. McBrarity became Maine's chapter leader. Remember, he was the concerned parent. Chapter leader for No Left Turn last summer. He has since put up a billboard-size sign of a school board member's face on his lawn and said it was surrounded by rat traps to prevent theft. This is a war with the left, McBrarity said in an email to NBC News. And in war, tactics and strategy can become blurry. That what? Okay. The fight has only escalated, and it shows no sign of slowing or of becoming unblurry, I guess. I don't know what that even is supposed to mean. I think that's sort of maybe like a fog of war type comment, and he didn't really know what the actual phrase was, and it's not war, so whatever. But there you go. And I guess this is another of the really insidious things about this, and I don't know whether there's discussion of this in this piece or not. But basically, you got a guy like McBrady. I don't know what news program, fake news program, he saw the critical race theory thing on. But whatever, he picks it up, and he goes to his school board all concerned, right? And then he finds this national organization, and they arm him with it. This is the I do my own research on the internet phase of the problem. He stumbles upon No Left Turn in education because he searches for, I'm angry about critical race theory and want to stop it from happening in my school district. And, top hit is No Left Turn for education. And he borrows their materials so he can go to a school board meeting and sound like maybe, sort of, kind of, he knows what he's talking about. And then he, comes in contact with he'll use the contact us button for more information. And they recruit him, and he becomes chapter leader. But it becomes like a career thing. The cottage industry now of fighting critical race theory has given him something to do. He's trapped in the house, perhaps during the COVID lockdown, or maybe he's out of work, or looking for a new line of work, or just more interested in this than whatever it is he's doing in suburban Maine. And it becomes a career path for these guys. I will advise other concerned parents in America, in Maine and elsewhere, how to fight their school board using the No Left Turn materials that they can research on the internet. And it sort of just becomes an alternative lifestyle for them, and they become big deals and successful. So it works. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here in, where are we? Netroots Radio. I'm distracted by glancing at Twitter and all the crazy things that are happening here. My goodness. Okay, well, let me click on a few things so I can perhaps return to it. But I don't know. It might be the whole day we spend on this NBC News article and everything that reminds me of. I used the break, I really did, to look up the name of the wacko former Board of Supervisors member from here in Loudoun County who had worked with Phyllis Schlafly and stumbled upon sort of her origin story, her supervillain origin story. Anyway, it was Lori Waters was her name. You remember? Okay, right. So there you go. Happy anniversary. You remember that. That's what I got you. Bad memories. All right. Well, Lori Waters was her name. Lori, in case you thought anything different. But anyway, I stumbled upon like her, like I said, her supervillain origin story here, which is maybe actually relevant to what I was just saying. Maybe we'll find out later when people tune out. But I was just going to say, oh yeah, okay. So her name was Lori Waters. Blah blah blah. She came, she went. Who cares? But her origin story is up there. It's on the Eagle Forum website, as it turns out. But I was just Googling. I was like, what was the name of that person again? And I thought, Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, Eagle Forum, and got the hit. And here's the origin story. It's relevant because we were just saying about this guy, what's his name, up in Maine, McBrady, that he, found himself a new career or side hustle, maybe, by championing the opposition to critical race theory where it wasn't happening, which is to say everywhere. And the same thing, I mean, that's the Lori Cole origin story. This is her telling of it, and it's long and boring, but and it's meant to make her look good, which is amazing all by itself, but I guess viewed in this light. We're going to make it evil. How's that? Here it is. Lori, I guess her maiden name, as they used to call it, and I'm sure that there's a better and more PC name for that now, but her birth name, I don't know. Lori Cole Waters' Eagle Forum story. Here it is. Sometimes missing a day of school is life-changing. Sometimes not, but this one was. When I was 15 years old, my mom planned a, quote, field trip for us to participate in the final day of the Georgia legislative session. We live in Virginia, but she lived in Georgia. And then she had to come and poison my local politics because reasons, which become clear in this story. So they went to the final day of the Georgia legislative session. She had started lobbying, Mom did, with a group of moms and grandmothers, the Georgia Eagles. And that is to say, the local chapter, the state chapter of the Eagle Forum, Phyllis Schlafly's group. And she thought I would benefit from seeing government in action, which wasn't happening because it was the final day of the legislative session, and they were there to lobby and wish for certain things to happen, but not actually watching how legislation happens. But okay, you get the point. It was still a valuable lesson. Anyway, she thought that she would benefit from seeing government in action. She also thought, I'm sure, that having your kids with you is a good prop. If you're there to lobby as a group of moms and grandmothers, you bring the kids to prove that you're moms and grandmothers. Not that no one will take your word for it, but anyway, that spark of excitement, being part of the legislative process, ignited my passion for politics, and I became a second-generation Eagle. And of course, Eagle is, USA, America. You got to be doing the right thing if you're an Eagle, right? Before I knew it, which is to say, when she knew it, but it's a turn of phrase. Before I knew it, I was attending Eagle Council with my mom and stirring controversy as a columnist for my school newspaper. So you see where this will take root, right? I'm precocious in my adoption of the Eagle Forum platform at 15, and it doesn't really belong in the school newspaper, and no one cares about it, and no one likes it, but it's heterodoxy, right? So, the teachers say, well, we really ought to include all viewpoints, and this is very interesting, and somebody is willing to write about this stuff, and yada, yada. So, okay, poof, now she's creating controversy, i.e. sucking and being boring in the school newspaper, but being protected by a teacher somewhere because they say we need viewpoints from all over. That's journalism. That's a journalism lesson for you kids, and it is. All right. So here it continues to develop. Being a pro-family conservative teen was not always popular. But P.S., this is Georgia in probably the 80s. So you know what? Wink, wink. It was probably pretty popular. Anyway, taking my cues and lessons from Phyllis and the Eagles, i.e. downloading their materials, although we didn't have, perhaps the internet per se, but this is when the campaign in a box would actually arrive in a box. Taking my cues, doing my own research on the internet, taking my cues and lessons from Phyllis and the Eagles, I learned to debate students and teachers. Basically, by the way, this is the evil origin story of Marjorie Taylor Greene as well. Same time, same place, same methodology, I would think, too. So I learned to debate students and teachers. Upon learning that I was a conservative, one atheist professor commented, and remember, she's 15 years old, so an atheist professor that she totally did encounter at age 15 said, "Oh, this is going to be fun," and I knew I was in for a battle. Even though it sometimes brought social challenges, I felt compelled to represent the conservative viewpoint, even when those who agreed with me sat in silence. I learned early on how the left used fear and mockery as a weapon, I'm doing it now, attempting to silence opposing viewpoints. Keep in mind, by the way, actually, I guess she still works for Eagle Forum now that she was bounced right out of the the local government. So I was wondering, when did she post this? But this was posted in 2017. But I was going to say she was telling this story essentially back in, 2002 when she was running for local office around here. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but we moved here in the mid to late 90s, and she was already here and doing her thing. And so 30 years ago, she was telling people, oh, I was totally accosted by an atheist professor. This has been going on forever. Anyway, I learned early on how the left used fear and mockery as a weapon. Yeah, okay. While pursuing a political science degree, and again here, so what she's done here is she may really have encountered an atheist professor, although why he told them he was atheist, I don't know. But I think she's skipped forward a few years here. So now she's pursuing her political science degree. While doing this, my semester away experience brought me to Eagle Forum's Capitol Hill office as an intern, where I met Chris Ardizoni Ullman. I'm my best guess at the pronunciation of the middle name there. Anyway, by the way, that's just another thing as we prepare to urge our own college-age son to take a semester abroad in Georgia. I don't know where she was going to college. The idea of taking a semester abroad meant going to foreign territory, Washington, D.C., to intern for Phyllis Schlafly and the Eagle Forum. And by the way, a huge expansion of her horizons. I don't think as her advisor I would have approved this. If I said, you've been working since you were 15 with the Eagle Forum and writing Eagle Forum materials into columns in your high school newspaper, and your proposal here for broadening your horizons is going to Washington, D.C. to do more work for Eagle Forum, I would like to see you maybe work with someone else. It could be conservative, but, the semester away might broaden your horizons a little more than doing more of what you were doing already. But okay, that's your passion. Go ahead. Go for it. What an amazing summer, she says, working on issues such as defunding Planned Parenthood and defending traditional marriage. Now, mind you, this would have been in the 80s and 90s. So, whatever. I knew that I had to return to D.C. and work for Phyllis. After graduation, I became the Eagle Forum National Collegians Director to help empower other young people to speak up against the leftists overtaking their campuses. Yikes. But sounds familiar, doesn't it? With a small D.C. office of 2 to 4 women, Phyllis was always preparing young women and men, don't forget them, to take on the political power players, while also develop relationships with friendly conservatives in the executive and legislative branches. As Chris moved on to work with Senator Ashcroft and then Sheila Maloney left for the House Republican Study Committee, my duties expanded to legislation, media, and elections. These pieces were so intertwined. How intertwined were they? They were so intertwined that the paragraph ends there. That's just good writing. Everybody knows that. We knew that electing the right person to office was one way to completely alter the legislative landscape. Well, several of them might be a better way. But so through the Political Action Committee, we would mobilize voters as well as financially support conservative candidates answering the call to serve. I recall interviewing this one particular Reagan-esque candidate who had been a radio host from Indiana. He had well, you know who they're going with here, right? He had a passion and a servant's heart. That's Christian code for you. He spoke our language, servant's heart, see? And the Eagles backed him 100%. We went all in for him. Yes, Mike Pence won his election to the House of Representatives that year. I always thought he had what it took to move up ticket. By the way, fast forward. Hang Mike Pence! Hang Mike Pence! I wonder whether she was chanting that. Or whether, is she now anti-Trump because they were hanging Mike Pence? I doubt it. With Phyllis as my coach and critic, I became a frequent guest on political news and commentary television and radio shows. When I appeared on Bill Maher's Politically Incorrect, I was likely the lone conservative, I doubt it, and Christian in the entire studio. They used humor to make fun of me. Teenage stuff. Been there, done that. But their arguments crumbled when confronted by truth. I feel like I should have like some sort of sound effect. Crumbled when confronted by truth. Now, playing this sound effect mostly for the thunder and lightning thing. Well, thunder is the sound effect part of it, not the dramatic music, but still. Anyway, we might as well also add,
Boring!
Okay, boring as well, but sure. Let's see, where were we? Their arguments crumbled when confronted by the truth. In one instance, Chevy Chase, and she doesn't mean the suburban Maryland enclave, the actual Chevy Chase, just told me to shut up. To which I responded, no. Whew. Man, she has got some skills. What a debate. I responded, no, along with a punch to his arm, which I imagine was also offered in a humorous way, but I don't know. Anyway, she was dead serious. She punched him in the arm. He wasn't quite expecting that from a petite 24-year-old woman. Woo-wee. But that is what the left wants us to do. What? Oh, to be quiet and do nothing. Yes, I do want that. However, Phyllis was my mentor, and because of her, I learned to use my voice and punch people. Of course, with a smile, rather than a feminist frown. Yeah. And a punch. Just, that's just a little mixed messaging there. I punched him, and I was petite and feminine, and I didn't frown. Okay. My involvement in politics soon changed. Given the grassroots training I'd received through Eagle Forum, I decided to run for local office. This is the part where I learned about her. After defeating a liberal incumbent, I became the youngest woman elected to the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. My duties in office and the desire to become a mom brought my formal time in the Eagle Forum office to an end. Yeah, that's the irony of working for Eagle Forum. It was time for Phyllis to guide other young women through the D.C. swamp and liberal media. It was my turn to pass the torch to Jessica Eckerd-Ziegler, whoever that is. My grassroots training with Eagle Forum helped tremendously in organizing my campaigns and creating coalitions for important initiatives. I learned how hard it is to govern. It was so hard I lost immediately. But I relied on my conservative principles. Reagan's 80% rule. I mixed up the 80 and Reagan. Reagan's 80% rule, whatever it is, and a coalition of supporters to balance the needs of a growing community. Okay. The bureaucracy resisted change, but perseverance and a group of moms can be more powerful. After 8 years in office, I guess she had 2 terms, and carrying 2 babies to board meetings, which you couldn't do to the Eagle Forum because they let you go when you became a husband. My husband, became a mom. Husband is coming up here. My husband and I decided to, quote, retire from the center of politics and move to Florida. Good, that's why she's gone. Okay. Really, though, for this season of life, my political battlefield merely shifted. Based on the needs of my children, including one with dyslexia, I should have moved to Ohio. Confused them. That would have been fun. All right, they moved to Florida. I'm sorry, dyslexics. Oh, come on. Dyslexics of the world can untie against me, as the old T-shirt used to say. Based on the needs of my children, including one with dyslexia, about whom we're making no fun whatsoever. We've moved from the public school to charter school to homeschool. Ah, yes. And now to a private Christian school. That's the evolution, right? Interesting. Oh, they don't believe in evolution. Shoot. What is it? What do they call it? Parental involvement in education is more important than ever. Thanks to Eagle Forum, I know my rights and how to be vocal. Don't mess with this mama bear. Oh, throwback to Sarah Palin. Sometimes I wonder about the political life I left behind in D.C. and Virginia, but I know God has a plan so much better than mine. It's probably true. Recently, on the final day of school, our director of education ended with Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. Do you want to know it? Okay. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. Get it? Eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. It was surreal, as if Phyllis was standing at the podium, ending Eagle Council and calling us to action. That was all I needed to hear. God calls some to serve in elective office, but God calls many more to serve in our communities as they lose. Elected leaders cannot protect our liberty and values alone, we are the force to restore American greatness. We are the voice to challenge liberalism and progressivism. We are the mentors of the next generation of leaders. So, who wants to take a field trip? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That's how this sort of thing happens, and it becomes a lifelong career for them because it sustains them in their loneliness and, actually might even pay the bills. So it's exciting when you get noticed by a national organization, even though the whole purpose of the national organization is let's look for kooks who will do this stupid work for us, hopefully for free, but if necessary, we'll pay them a couple bucks. Okay, by the way, thanks to Dave R., who tells me that Washoe is in Nevada, which is actually Nevada, but they say Nevada, and I like to go with the local pronunciations, even if it's crazy. But okay, that's good. That was helpful and useful. I should probably maybe that will serve as a note to myself to look for that initial tweet, just to let you know that I didn't totally make it up, but I do think it was in Washoe County where this happened. All right. Let's see. Some other notes here. Greg passing something on. We'll have to open that up and trace that back later on. Back to the critical race theory story, because why not? Everybody is talking about this. We could do the whole show on it. And then we'll talk to Joan and talk about real stuff. Anyway, conflicts like this back in Maine, right? The one about fighting the school board over critical race theory. Conflicts like this are playing out in cities and towns across the country amid the rise of at least 165 local and national groups that aim to disrupt lessons on race and gender, according to an NBC News analysis of media reports and organizations' promotional materials. Reinforced by conservative think tanks, law firms, and activist parents, these groups have found allies in families frustrated over COVID-19 restrictions in schools and have weaponized the right's opposition to critical race theory, turning it into a political rallying point. While the efforts vary, they share strategies of disruption, publicity, and mobilization. In other words, like the Tea Party protests of town halls being held to discuss the proposed Affordable Care Act, etc. The groups swarm school board meetings, inundate districts with time-consuming public records requests, and file lawsuits and federal complaints alleging discrimination against white students. They have become media darlings in conservative circles and made the debate over critical race theory a national issue. Virtually all school districts insist they are not teaching critical race theory, but many activists and parents have begun using it as a catch-all term to refer to what schools often call equity programs, teaching about racism or LGBTQ inclusive policies. Now, conservative activists are setting their sights on ousting as many school board members as they can, and local Republican parties have vowed to help, viewing the revolt against critical race theory as akin to, what did I just say, the Tea Party wave from a decade ago. Activists and parents have launched 50 recall efforts this year aimed at unseating 126 school board members, according to a new report from Ballotpedia, a website that tracks U.S. politics and elections. Most of those recalls, which already surpassed the record for a single year, started as objections to COVID-19 restrictions. But 5 of the most recently launched campaigns, including a particularly contentious fight in Loudoun County, Virginia, includes concerns about critical race theory. And in a new development this year, rather than targeting a single member, these efforts often target multiple members or entire school boards, according to Abby Smith, a researcher at Ballotpedia. This data, which is limited to the 39 states that allow for recalls of local elected officials, suggests that political discord at the local school level is at an all-time high. At least 50 other school districts from Washington to Florida have been the scenes of local unrest over the idea of critical race theory, according to an NBC News analysis of media reports. Prominent Republican political figures are rushing in to support parent activists, hoping that these local battles will mobilize conservative voters in next year's midterms and beyond. The push comes as President Joe Biden and Democrats have benefited from popular economic legislation, but show some vulnerability on culturally divisive issues. As former Trump advisor Steve Bannon put it in his podcast on May, the path to save the nation is very simple. It goes through the school boards. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a Republican, said this month that he will get the, quote, political apparatus involved so we can make sure there's not a single school board member who supports critical race theory, unquote. Political action committees have been set up dedicated to the cause. The clashes at school board meetings and online are partly anchored in real differences, quote-unquote, real differences, in parents' opinions on COVID-19, race, and America's future, said Jeffrey Hennig, director of the Politics and Education program at Columbia University's Teachers College. But it's being exploited by actors at the national level, he said, who see it as an opportunity to reshuffle the politics of the standard educational reform debate. The origin of one of the largest groups targeting school boards can be traced back to last June, all the way back to the founders, right? Last June, when many educators began looking for ways to teach students about the protests following George Floyd's murder and reposition how American history is taught. When the Gladwin Elementary School in the suburbs of Philadelphia decided to teach students about the concepts of racism, privilege, and justice during the last week of classes, Ilana Yaron Fishbein, pardon me, I forgot the last name, a mother of 2 students at the school, sprang into action. Fishbein, a former social worker, sent a letter to the superintendent calling the lessons a, quote, plan to indoctrinate the children into the, quote, woke culture, unquote. There's a quote in the middle of that quote. She said the superintendent never responded because it was dumb, though the school district later said that the lesson plans were age appropriate and did not shame students and that parents were allowed to opt out. Fishbein said other white parents in the district attacked her on Facebook when she shared her letter. So Fishbein moved her children to a private school. Remember, this was the last week of classes. So I have an inkling that maybe this was going to happen anyway. But anyway, moved to a private school, fantastic, goodbye, and started a group to advocate against anti-racist teaching. She called it No Left Turn in Education. Except she's in a private school. She's got exactly what she wanted. Why is she meddling in local public school affairs? Because she can, that's why. And she'd prefer to get what she wants paid for by the state, which is socialism, but not for her, because for her it's freedom. So I point that out. The schools have been hijacked, she said in an interview. Our kids are captive audiences. No, they're not. Put them in private school. That's what you did. But some people can't afford that. Yes, but you don't care about them. You care about you. Give me a break. You care about the poor. That's what this is all about? I doubt it. The schools have been hijacked, she said in an interview. Our kids are captive audiences, and they think they can do whatever they want with our kids. Fishbein's endeavor received a significant boost in September when she appeared on Tucker Carlson's primetime Fox News show. By the next day, No Left Turn's Facebook page had shot up from fewer than 200 followers to 30,000. The group now has 30 chapters in 23 states, a rapid expansion Fishbein credits to Carlson's show, and now makes a living off of, I would guess. He launched our movements. He doesn't know it. Sure. But he did, Fishbein said. She said her nonprofit group, which is volunteer-driven and relies on small donations to cover promotional materials and legal fees, and pay her, now fields requests from groups of parents ranging from 50 people to more than 1,000. Wow. In America, groups range from sometimes 50, sometimes 1,000. What a range. Well, they're asking to get involved in No Left Turn's umbrella, under their umbrella. The local chapters are the, quote, boots on the ground, she said, confronting school administrators at board meetings and through records requests. Wow, there's the gumming up of the works that they mentioned earlier. We want to know, what are you teaching? What are you doing? Fishbein said, and it's exactly what I got. A lack of transparency. They don't want to answer. And the real answer is they are answering. You just won't take yes for an answer, right? Are you going to agree with us and not teach critical race theory? Yes. Well, then we want body cams. Well, no. Well, then we want all records of everything anybody ever taught. The teachers should stop spending their time teaching students and start spending their time reporting to us, the parents. Anyway, among the many people who reached out to Fishbein after her Tucker Carlson appearance was Jonathan O'Brien, a personal injury lawyer in New York who wanted to help, and Gabrielle Clark, a mother in Las Vegas who was upset that her biracial son had received a D- after refusing to participate in a mandatory sociology class where the teacher labeled certain identities as, quote, oppressive. Fishbein connected them, and with O'Brien's representation, Clark sued her son's charter school. Again, you've gone to a charter school. You can leave it. Her son's charter school in December, arguing it was a violation of her son's privacy and free speech rights that the sociology teacher had asked students to disclose any disabilities as well as their religious and sexual identities. I have questions. The charter school conceded in court filings, though, that it did not let Clark's son drop the class, but said no one had to disclose their identities and that his poor grade was due to his refusal to complete assignments, a position with which former conservatives might otherwise have agreed. After the suit was filed, administrators agreed to expunge his grade for the class. The charter school's CEO called the suit an ill-intentioned attack by activists on any conversation about racism or slavery that paints aspects of our country's past in a negative light. The litigation is ongoing, and the district has asked that it be dismissed. The case garnered media attention on the right, and slowly, O'Brien said, more conservative advocacy groups became interested in these cases. He started schoolhouserights.org as a project of the International Organization for the Family, a conservative nonprofit group, to raise funds to take on more cases like Clark's. By the way, in case you've missed it in all of the twists and turns in the last paragraph, what happened here is a personal injury attorney took on a case suing a local school, a charter school organization, over this dispute on the grade and how the class was taught. And now the think tank that they hooked up with gave them the money to start their own conservative advocacy group, schoolhouserights.org, as a project under this other umbrella, the idea of which is to raise funds to pay for the cases that this guy sues on. So in other words, I would love to represent people in court, except they have no money. What we can do is raise money so that they can pay me to represent them in court. Freedom, America, is entrepreneurial. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. This is going to be a tough day to do a summary for Scott if I don't get to another article, but we'll try and come up with some more links for him so that it's not such a chore writing the summary. But I do want to continue. There is a bit more, and I think this is very revealing and interesting, even if it means not getting to a bunch of other stuff. But eventually we will, when our next segment comes up and Joan joins us. And even if Joan doesn't join us, we'll pretend she joined us so that we can get to some other stories. But all right, where were we? Let's see. The connection that, who was it, made for the, Fishbein, right, yes, Fishbein connects O'Brien, the lawyer, with Clark, the plaintiff, and they're so successful, except that they didn't have any success, that they now start schoolhouserights.org, taking funding, I guess, from the International Organization for the Family, whatever that is, a conservative nonprofit group, and the partnership started raising funds so that they could take on more cases like Clark's. That means cases where they can make a political point, but the person who's the plaintiff can't pay them anything, so they get everybody else to pay them instead. So they crowdfund filing nuisance suits. Gee whiz, it's an amazing thing that they could get an eminent attorney like, what's his name, O'Brien, who might not be eminent, to take on these cases merely because they've started an organization dedicated to paying him. These dedicated individuals from around the country who, for no reason other than their belief in their principles and rights and getting paid through these organizations, have taken on these loser cases that have gone nowhere. How amazing and wonderful for freedom. Some people, though, says O'Brien, are treating it like a gold rush. This is a new area where people think they can either become famous or make money on the issue. And they're probably right. He actually just says that. Some people are treating it like a gold rush, like me. And people who do that are right. O'Brien later joined a coalition of attorneys focused on this cause, organized by Christopher Rufo, a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, a conservative think tank. Are you having trouble making ends meet by raising money $5 and $10 at a time to fund these cases? Why not get together with other people who are also having difficulty, and you can pool your funds, and maybe a couple of you can make a living out of this after all. And if not, I'll give you the Koch brothers money that comes into the Manhattan Institute instead. Rufo, who said he was in touch with then President Donald Trump's staff before he issued an executive order last September banning critical race theory's use by federal agencies, promised in a March tweet to make critical race theory, quote, toxic in the public imagination. Rufo declined an interview request. The goal is to have the public read something crazy in the newspaper. I mean, he admits that. And immediately think, critical race theory, he wrote. That is their goal. We have decodified. I don't know. Decodified, I mean, that's decoded, I think is what he means. But we have decodified the term and will recodify it to annex the entire range of cultural constructions that are unpopular with Americans. The wording is odd, but the theory is sound. The strategy will probably work. You just blur out what critical race theory really is, and then every time somebody says, they wouldn't give me my crispy chicken sandwich until I put the mask on. Well, that's critical race theory. It isn't, but, say it is. And everyone will go, critical race theory, I heard about that on Tucker Carlson. And it's a good plan. All right, what's up? Shared connections and shared strategies is the next section. The growth of school board-focused groups has coincided with a broader conservative effort to make critical race theory a national referendum on the discussion of race in America. Throughout the winter, organizations like the Heritage Foundation, you know what they are, and the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, which produces model bills on Republican causes, well put there, Republican causes, right, held webinars that warned about the threat of teaching critical race theory. By the way, it wasn't that long ago that an organization like NBC News would have said that ALEC was actually like a nonpartisan group. Anyway, Fishbein said she took part in a private briefing hosted by the Heritage Foundation in May that featured lawmakers from Idaho, hey Joan, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Texas, and other states to discuss model legislation, which is what they do, to block critical race theory, which isn't happening. Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Iowa, Montana, Oklahoma, and Tennessee have already advanced some form of a restriction, and 15 states have legislation pending. The Heritage Foundation declined to comment. As lawmakers proposed legislation targeting critical race theory this spring, more activist organizations similar to No Left Turn sprouted up. They wanted in on the action. Their memberships ballooning with exposure on conservative TV and streaming programs. Each group followed a similar pattern of providing toolkits for activism, campaigns in a box, right? Teaching people how to file open records requests and offering to help parents publicize what's happening in their school districts. Maybe they don't know how to get it in the right hands, but we do. Nicole Neely, president of Parents Defending Education, said in March, we know a lot of reporters and we're happy to share those things. Neely, who lives in the Washington metro area, started Parents Defending Education as a nonprofit group at the beginning of the year. She also runs, because she's a serial entrepreneur, Speech First, a nonprofit group that has sued universities over systems to combat racism that the group believes violates free speech rights. And she had previously worked at conservative groups such as the Cato Institute and Freedom Works. So what did she do with her pandemic time? I no longer want to go into the office, right? I don't want to go in there because COVID, which I believe is a hoax or whatever. But I'm staying at home because we've closed the office. And in the meantime, I'm just going to start a bunch of other groups and see if people will send me $5 and $10 at a time. By the way, what am I doing a radio show for? I should be doing this. Parents Defending Education aims to teach parents how to become activists, Neely had said. By the way, I keep diverging from this story, and I can't help it. But doesn't this remind you of something? I mean, this is a multi-level marketing scheme, a pyramid scheme, or one of those things where you put an ad, you might see an ad in the paper or a magazine somewhere, like learn to, earn $50,000 or more at home working for yourself. And you just send away for our kit to show you how. And you send away for the kit, and the kit is instructions on how to put advertisements in papers and magazines saying earn $50,000 a year or more at working from home, be your own boss, send away for your free kit to learn how. I mean, isn't that essentially what's going on here? She's starts her own Parents Defending Education. And all you got to do is send the money, and we'll send you a kit on how to start Parents Defending Education 2.0 Iowa chapter or whatever. And then you do that, and then people ask you about that and how to start it in Des Moines area or just move it to another state, whatever. All right. So, Parents Defending Education aims to teach parents how to become activists, Neely has said, but the group is also playing an active role. It has filed civil rights complaints against schools in Massachusetts for creating an affinity space for students of color after a string of attacks on Asians, and against districts in Minnesota, Missouri, and Ohio, where administrators pledged to dismantle racism in their schools. So again, suing people who said, let's get rid of racism. And when Asian students started getting attacked because these kind of nuts were saying that COVID was both at the same time a hoax and a Chinese bioweapon, when they started beating up Filipino kids because China something Wuhan lab, and the school district said, let's make a place where Asian students can get together and not get beaten up, this woman sued them. So thanks a lot, Neely. She's a real sweetheart. She said during a webinar on how to be a Nazi last month that she wants school administrators who take these steps to, quote, know there will be consequences. Neely did not answer email requests for comment and hung up when reached by phone because she's scared of being identified as a Nazi. Though the political action committees and nonprofit groups will eventually disclose financial information, in most cases this hasn't happened yet. So it's unclear how much money this fight has drawn. And that's an actually interesting and integral part of it as well, right? This is a quick strike thing. They make critical race theory into a lightning rod. Everyone goes crazy. You figure out where this is coming from. You go to try and figure out who's funding it, and they just close shop and reopen as something else later on. And within this, certain grace period, they can do all of this work. And the reports aren't yet due on who's funding them, but then when they come due, they either file lies and close when they get fined for filing their lies, or they just close so they don't have to file at all. Or they just ignore the whole thing and say, sue us for the information. Now, meanwhile, they're suing everybody else for information. I'm making an open records request. I demand transparency. All right, who funds you? I'm not telling, because freedom. Goodbye. Okay, so where were we? Though they might, I guess, eventually disclose their financial information. In most cases, they haven't been required to yet, so it's unclear where the money's coming from. South Lake Families PAC, organized around a school board battle in a wealthy Dallas-Fort Worth suburb, raised more than $215,000 as of April 21st, according to finance reports filed with the Texas Ethics Commission. That's a no-show job if I ever heard one. That doesn't include more than $100,000 raised by two PAC-backed school board candidates who successfully ran on a platform of stopping the district's Cultural Competence Action Plan. Because who wants to be competent? There's no shortage of free publicity for the cause. The conservative focus on critical race theory is pervading right-wing news publications like Fox News and Breitbart, Fox the News, we say, which covered the issue in as many as 750 articles per week in May, according to Dominic Stecula, a political science professor at Colorado State University. The topic is also the focus of consistent discussion in local GOP Facebook groups, where 2% of all Facebook posts from local parties mentioned critical race theory in May, climbing to 3.6% so far in June, according to Kevin Runing, an assistant professor of political science at Miami University, who tracks political Facebook posts. Everybody's doing it. That's about the same as the share of posts mentioning Antifa in the groups following the U.S. Capitol riot, when conservative groups were falsely blaming the far-left collection of orchestrating the January 6th attack. Now, as a result of this movement, school boards are now facing an influx of lawsuits and records requests that can cost money and time that are short in supply. Are in short supply, of course, as well as public meetings that have become a sounding board for a variety of far-right causes. The thing that disturbs me most about politicizing school boards is there is no mention of kids. It's not community-centered. It's centered on political thought and theory and things that don't connect to education, said Sonia McKenzie, a member of the board of directors of the National School Boards Action Center, which advocates for public education. Actually, like pro-public education, one of these organizations. How nice. And of course, by the way, terrific irony in pointing that out, that, the problem with these groups, as she points out, is that they focus on political thought and political theory, even though they are supposedly organized to get political thought and political theory out of education. It's a little wacky. The things that have been politicized, reopening schools, mask wearing, critical race theory, a lot of these are above and beyond the purview of what you do as school boards, bringing us back around to the original premise that Republicans love to run on national platforms, even when totally inappropriate. Here we are. In Nevada, Washoe County's school board halted in-person meetings in April after residents filled their large auditorium and lobbed insults and threats of violence during the public comment portion. So how do you like that? They got the school board meetings back online in person because they were able to overcome the local authorities' interest in taking precautions to tamp down on a global pandemic, but they managed to get the meetings back in person, and then they immediately had to suspend them again because the people were too violent. It was not dangerous to show up and get COVID. It was dangerous to show up and get killed at a school board meeting instead. Meetings opened to the public again in May in a small office where only a few speakers can be present at a time. Undeterred, hundreds of conservative activists and local residents, many without children in the district, interesting, according to their public testimony anyway, waited in the Reno sun, I guess that's where Washoe is, Reno area, until their names were called to speak out against critical race theory and the board's recent adoption of a student-led anti-discrimination resolution. The kids actually taking a hand in their own education and getting involved and doing all the things that Lori Waters said inspired a lifetime of work for her, and the parents, people who don't even have kids in the educational system, have showed up to stop them. This is an opportunity for what I feel like I've been screaming from the rooftops about. She probably has been. Said Karen England, executive director for Nevada Family Alliance. You'll never believe what they are. Well, they're a conservative nonprofit group known for its efforts to end drag queen story hour at local libraries. Remember when that one got flung at the wall and I guess it stuck? I don't think that was an issue in Nevada, but what the hell? They heard on talk radio somewhere about drag queen story hour. We're going to stop this before it comes to Nevada. Don't worry. It'll be a long time before it comes to Nevada. Although who knows? Las Vegas. I don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe it originated in Nevada. The group recently proposed placing body cameras on teachers, there they are, to ensure they aren't teaching critical race theory. I got my start worried about drag queens. Now I want body cams on the teachers to make sure they're not secretly teaching critical race theory, whatever it takes to keep the donations coming in. During the most recent meeting, which lasted 11 hours, speakers railed at school board members, calling them Marxists, because why not, racists, Nazis, and child abusers, among other epithets. Kristen DeHaan, the mother of a senior in a district high school, said she attends the meetings in support of an expanded social justice curriculum and LGBTQ inclusive sex education. I don't always agree with the board by any stretch of the imagination, DeHaan said, who is white. By the way, it says DeHaan, who is white, said. But listening to the anger and what truly feels like hatred, and Martin Luther King being taken out of context over and over again, it's really hard. I guess that's why they told you she was white. I definitely get glares when I go up and speak. It's uncomfortable, but I feel it's important to be out there. Other school boards face less explosive, but in some ways just as disruptive, pushback by parents. In South Kingstown, Rhode Island, The parent of an incoming kindergartner submitted over 200 public records requests in 2 months, seeking copies of middle and high school curricula as a kindergartner, lists of all books related to gender available in the library, and 10 years' worth of harassment complaints and emails. The district said it would take 300 hours to compile all the records requested. Timothy Ryan, executive director of the Rhode Island School Superintendents Association, called the onslaught of records requests an effort to shut the system down. I believe their intent is really to have the public lose confidence in public education, he said. There was the war on Christmas, and now everybody is teaching critical race theory. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find 5 people in the state who could even define that. Wink, wink, see? Back in Cumberland, Maine, now we know the location. The situation has escalated. After McBrady became even more certain that the school was pushing critical race theory. How? It just became that way, that's all. He filed a public records request, once he learned how to do that revealed the school had paid over $12,000 to a nonprofit called Community Change Incorporated for diversity and equity training for the school's staff. McBrady then filed at least 53 more records requests, according to the school district superintendent, and said on a GoFundMe page that Maine's Freedom of Information law is, quote, your most powerful weapon. Fishbein said No Left Turn paid for some of McBrady's court costs and records requests, and maybe some other stuff too. On May 26, McBrady sent an email to Porter, the superintendent, and the school board with links to coverage of his crusade, plus a list of demands, including that Porter publicly apologize for a letter denouncing white supremacy sent by the Equity Committee a year ago. McBrady copied a producer for Fox News and 2 Daily Wire reporters. This is just the tip of the iceberg on media coming your way and national support aligned with our cause to fight CRT, he wrote. The next day, McBrady appeared on Fox News' Tucker Carlson Tonight. A representative for Fox News declined to comment, but McBrady's efforts have run into problems with authorities. Last week, McBrady was charged by the local police department with improper influence. I'm not even sure what that is. After he allegedly threatened to release a recording between himself and the deceased father of a school board chair, Tyler McGinley, if McGinley didn't resign. Getting a little creepy there. You catch that? I'll release a recording between me and the school board chair's now deceased father. My hope is that this summons is a reality check on his behavior, said McGinley, who was unclear if the recording truly exists. I wanted to make sure that if the harassment was going to continue to happen, it wouldn't happen to other people. When asked about the recording that led to the charge, McBrady didn't deny that he'd threatened to release it. He said in a text message that he had, quote, more info on Tyler that would provide a lot of context as to why MSAD 51, I guess this Maine something school district, is teaching critical race theory doctrines. The charge is pending with the district attorney. Ann Maximowitz, I hope, the school board member whose face appeared on McBrady's booby-trapped billboard, said the media attention has been overwhelming. The critical race theory debate became a central issue of last week's school board race, with Maximowitz facing calls to resign. Instead, she won re-election. Phew, at least that happened. Porter said he was surprised by how much hate can be generated by a small group of people in the community who, he says, have equated equity initiatives with critical race theory. For people who are not in agreement, they're using the word equity and saying, there you are, you're teaching CRT. And the equity becomes a horrible thing that we're doing, Porter said. I feel like the district in some ways has gotten used, almost held hostage by this national ideology or national movement that says we're all teaching CRT and we're all trying to indoctrinate kids. Porter said the battle is far from over. It is a kind of black cloud hanging over the district, he said. And with that, we have finally reached the end of this one article, but it's reminded us of so many things, and it's very much, it's pervasive around the country and can metastasize very easily into any other whatever topic grabs your fancy, because Humanitarianism, it doesn't matter whether you're really talking about critical race theory or not. You mention any word that you can somehow convince other people really means CRT, then, which, by the way, in my understanding was always cathode ray tube, but that's because I'm 100 years old. But that's all it takes to loop people in on it. I don't know what that word means, but then you said what it really means is critical race theory, and that I also don't know what it means, but I have heard it on television, so therefore I am outraged. This is actually quite fascinating. There really are other things going on, by the way, and maybe we can do a quick couple of hits, maybe search around, cast some lines around for things we might want to discuss in our last segment, perhaps with Joan, or perhaps she's had enough of these things. But just switching gears for a moment, let's see. We've got a new report from the New York Times in the last day or so that really, I think we've all suspected, was implicit in the previous stories, but now is explicitly explained. Trump pressed official to wield Justice Department to back election claims. Subheader, the former president began pressuring his incoming acting attorney general even before announcing that his predecessor was stepping down, emails show. The basic upshot here in paragraph 1. An hour before President Trump announced in December that William Barr would step down as attorney general, the president began pressuring Barr's eventual replacement to have the Justice Department take up his false claims of election fraud. We can certainly spend some time examining that. I don't know if that's something that Joan has been looking at this morning, but I think we all knew that that was coming. But just want to note for the record, it's here. It came. On a sort of nod to the congressional front, for those of you following, at least peripherally, the continuing investigations and prosecutions of the January 6th insurrection, the news that sprouted the other day among the sedition watchers out there on Twitter and now reported in the Washington Post, former Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, previously known as Putin's best friend in Congress. Remember, even the idiot Kevin McCarthy seemed to get that right, his famous thing, even though everybody really should have been paying attention to what they were talking about in that conversation, which was Ukraine. His famous flub of saying that he really thinks that two people are on Putin's payroll, Trump and Rohrabacher. Former Congressman Dana Rohrabacher says he protested outside the Capitol on January 6th. No word on whether he actually breached the Capitol. He probably could have gotten in as a former congressman. He could have walked right in. He should have escorted the people in. He'd probably get better results with that than Marjorie Taylor Greene escorting people around the day before, and Lauren Boebert. Former Congressman Dana Rohrabacher said on Monday that he was among the crowds outside the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, but claimed that he was there to protest the election and did not join others in storming the building. I haven't seen any photos of him inside yet, but Rohrabacher acknowledged his presence outside the Capitol in an interview with a Maine newspaper. Hey, Maine, big day for you. Over the weekend, social media users began circulating photos that appeared to show the former congressman and associate standing among the pro-Trump crowd. I marched to protest, and I thought the election was fraudulent and should be investigated, and I wanted to express that and be supportive of that demand, he said in an interview with the Portland Press-Herald. So anyway, we could dive further into that, but I got to tell you, the photos, there are no photos yet of him inside the building. They may not exist. He may not have gone, but being outside the building, there were certainly people outside the building that didn't go in, but he's positioned with many people who appear to have made their way in. And so I find it difficult to believe. He probably thought he was immune from any prosecution over it, too. One, because of his Trumpiness, and two, because of his being a former member of Congress, and he might have made some other claim of right to have been in the building at the time. So I have my doubts about whether or not he really stayed outside the building. Anyway, I thought that was of some interest. Perhaps also of some interest, just to mention it and put it on the record, Media Matters noticed the other day Steve Bannon on his radio show, no more real or less fake than mine, but has come out with a new threat I thought was interesting. He's backing, I guess, really the threat of Arizona Republican State Senator Wendy Rogers, a supporter of the fake audit, which is still ongoing there. Apparently, Merrick Garland has, in his latest speech, made some comment about the situation there and saying we're going to be taking a look at what this nonsense is really on, and these so-called audits that are now spread to other states are based on disinformation, which is probably true. And anyway, Wendy Rogers, a supporter of the audit and a self-proclaimed Oath Keepers member, tweeted, "You will not touch Arizona ballots or machines unless you want to spend time in an Arizona prison." So she and Steve Bannon both say, lock him up, to Merrick Garland.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter now joins us, and hey, guess what? As it happens, she's got the same problem, of course, because everybody's got the same problem. In Idaho, there's, of course, local activity on critical race theory, because it doesn't really matter whether anybody's actually trying to teach it there or not. It's something to do, and you've had local action on that issue. Is that right?
Oh, of course we
Yes,
have,
right.
with our Lieutenant Governor,
Okay.
Janice McGeachin. McGeehan. I don't know how she says it. I like McGeachin because it sounds, I don't know.
Weirder. Foreign.
Weirder. You remember her from last time when she was
Yes.
making edicts in the absence of our regular governor and
Yeah.
doing stuff that was unconstitutional and just
mask
being
thing.
generally, well, now she is chairing a critical race theory commission for the state, and they're not officially, just her own, made up of a bunch of other crazy legislators, and has demanded from every school district their curriculum for a whole variety of courses that may include critical race theory, even though she hasn't provided a definition of critical race theory.
And she would never be able to do that. But yeah, that's quite in line with exactly what we're finding out. That
And the cost of this, of course, is hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, and all their
For
time.
school districts, staff, time, material collection, everything else, money that, of course, isn't there.
Yeah.
We had a little mini expose on local news last week from I guess he's acting president of the School Board Association for the state.
Acting. Trump
Who heard that this was happening, thought, well, school boards, this is kind of important. Perhaps I should sit in and see what's going on. And he attended a meeting or got information, I'm not sure which. I don't know if they're Zooming, if they're meeting in person, how exactly they're doing it. But he was pretty horrified by the extent of what they were trying to do, and really sort of blew the whistle on it. It hasn't made much of a splash outside of Boise that I've seen, but of course it's happening here too. And of course, this is something that, as he said, is totally political, and it's how they're starting their race for governor and lieutenant governor, because the co-chair, if you could call him that, of McGeechan's committee is running for lieutenant governor.
Okay. So that, I guess that makes a certain amount of sense, but it's interesting. So she's using state resources, I guess. She's got her own budget to do this. I Googled it and found some stories on it. Yeah, McGeechan announces indoctrination task force members. I haven't opened it yet, but I guess that the
indoctrination task force.
Yes, not this is. They're supposed to be anti-indoctrination, but you get the idea. Right, and then I noticed there's another one here. Idaho press release: Idaho Lieutenant Governor assembling task force to blah 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 blah. But the website hosting the press release is, of course, at idaho.gov. So
yeah,
And
this has already had some pretty substantial implications. Well, not implications, consequences.
Yeah.
For higher education in Idaho. They managed to cut the budget for higher ed by $2.5 billion.
Wow.
No, million. I'm sorry, $2.5 million.
Okay, that's quite a chunk.
I've been writing infrastructure stuff, so million, billion, trillion, Specifically, they took $1.5 million away from Boise State University on the basis of, and we found out later, email from a state legislator, who was undoubtedly Republican, to the president of Boise State, alleging some big traumatic incident happening in a sort of social work course about a student being made to feel bad because she was white.
Oh, well, that's a tough thing.
This person sent an email. All of these courses, they were core courses for incoming students, I believe. So sort of, sociology courses just to get everybody into the mindset of being in college. I don't know what exactly they were. But anyway, they canceled all of them, or postponed them anyway, to look into this incident. They hired a respected law firm in the city to investigate. And of course, it ended up being bogus entirely.
Well.
This never happened.
Oh.
But it was the basis by which the legislature took $1.5 million away from Boise State University.
Yeah. What are they going to do to paint their field blue now? They need that money. Well, they probably don't need to paint it. But, I mean, of course, by the way, it'll naturally be the academics that suffer. Maybe not the football program so much. But, wow, this system works. They're gumming it up, and they've, just like everything else, any campaign in a box. She found out that there was something hotter than anti-masking and switched her main focus.
She'll still do anti-masking if it comes up.
If there's money in it, yeah, right. If there's a thing that she can do. But I guess the whole thing started with noting, my whole day started with reading Adam Serwer's tweet about how quickly everything flipped from, free speech advocacy, which was sort of the umbrella under which they did the anti-masking thing, and switched from free speech advocacy as my main focus in life. I'm just for free speech to, critical race theory is the hot thing that I can use to raise money now. Now I am for having the state crack down on dangerous ideas, because free speech is over, and the new hotness is, authoritarian suppression of free speech and academic inquiry. So that was quick.
Because there doesn't need to be any kind of intellectual consistency here.
No. Right, well,
it's not about that.
That's for people who like education. And I hate education. That's what I'm here for. Well, all right, so it happens
Republican
everywhere.
Hypocrisy certainly isn't news.
No.
They've built a whole party on it.
But, yeah, I thought today's inquiry was perhaps a little bit more helpful than just tracking. Well, what are they saying to try to see if it'll stick today? Although sometimes that's helpful in pointing out the next well, it's interesting to point out the pattern and helpful to point out the next outrage before it can take root. But
Right.
there are so many that they're
you
flinging.
know, and to learn by the example of Idaho, because Idaho will always
Yeah.
be your example of how dangerous it is.
Yes,
This
and we don't
is
check
hurting
very often.
higher education in the state.
Yeah. Well,
Not to mention the turmoil it's created for all of the school districts that are trying to figure out, do they really need to comply with this?
yeah.
Where are
And
they going to get
they
the
got
money
enough
to
on their
do
minds.
it?
They're just coming
Is
back
this
to live
even
instruction
official?
in some
It's only
places.
quasi-official. I mean, yes, coming from the lieutenant governor, but is the state demanding this? Are there going to be repercussions for the school districts if they don't comply?
No.
Nobody really knows how to proceed with this.
Yeah. Well, that's probably part of, that's a feature for them and not a bug. It creates chaos and freezes people in place so that they can't plan for anything. And even if what they're doing is trying to plan to not offend these groups over critical race theory, then and that could be a success for these groups, they still get to point and say, well, look at all the other things that suffered because of our meddling. See, I told you public education didn't work.
Right.
Right. So just
Right.
something like that.
Again, let
Amazing.
Idaho be your guide of what not to do, rest of the country.
Yeah.
Don't be Idaho.
Well, it is kind of interesting to check it, not only, to find out what might be coming in your neck of the woods, but also to trace it going in the other direction. The likelihood that there are, radical critical race theorist teachers all over Idaho is pretty low, I would think.
Yes.
But, nonetheless, the panic sets in and you see people. So it flows in both directions. And, well, look, that's the reason why you check in with places everywhere. And we have the luck
really
of checking with Idaho.
boils
every
down to
week.
the fact that Boise State hired a woman to be its president.
Oh, my God, you can't have that.
And she came from the Bay Area.
Oh,
And
well.
she has multiple piercings in one ear.
Oh,
I'm
God.
pretty sure that's the whole
San Francisco
basis.
values. Oh, yeah, one piercing for every syllable in the phrase San Francisco values. That's the
Yes.
No wonder you're fired. I mean, you can't break with tradition like that, said the blue football field people. Okay. Whatever,
Yeah.
man. I'm surprised.
It also comes down to the fact that there's this long simmering hatred on the part of the oldest university in Idaho, the University of Idaho, where the law school is based and where many of the politicos in the legislature went to school.
Yeah.
They hate Boise State. They hate the fact that they've always hated Boise State, but now that they've got a winning football team, they really, really, really hate them.
Oh, wow. So they couldn't even jump on the
A
bandwagon.
lot of it just boils down to this stupid collegiate civil war.
It's hard to believe. And it's hard to believe that football couldn't win them over. I would have thought
I know.
that's the sort of thing that went, well, they aren't doing well. Let's become fans. And by the way, that blue field is the most brilliant thing I ever saw in my life. Everyone knows it. I mean,
Yes.
it's ridiculous, but, they're going to have Boise State is on. I want to see that field. Genius. Pure genius.
It works.
Yeah.
It works. Much better than Washington State's red one. The red one.
I haven't seen that. No, okay.
Yeah, it's really ugly.
Well, that's crazy. Red. What? Who would...
Anyway,
Interesting idea.
Idaho.
Okay.
Idaho.
I like Idaho, and I love checking in. Well, let's see. There's many national bits of news, but I've got
There's
a couple
always
things.
something happening on
What are you
infrastructure
doing?
to keep
Yeah.
infrastructure from actually happening.
Okay. That is definitely going on. Where do we stand with... I know there's lots of negotiations going on and multiple fronts and multiple groups holding talks, but no one getting anywhere. But
No one getting anywhere. Now, apparently, Biden, or not Biden, White House, whoever has told House Democrats that they've told the gang in the Senate that they only have a week to 10 days.
okay.
Because, sure, another week to 10 days before we go on recess, and then nothing can happen until we come back for 2 weeks in July and then leave again for a month. Well, actually 6 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, this is really frustrating, and your infuriating read for the day was going to come from Politico, as usual, about how Republicans are plotting an infrastructure two-step, spend more than kill Biden's agenda. And, that they're out there actually telling us that this is what they're going to do.
They're being
And then
open.
doing it is sort of frustrating because, Manchin and Sinema are going to go along with it. The idea is that they come up with a lot of money, a massive infrastructure. They agree to this in these bipartisan negotiations.
Okay.
And they say, yeah, sure, because it's something as important as infrastructure, you'll get your 10 votes with all of this massive money. But that will draw moderate Democrats away from the idea of the second track that Schumer and Biden and Bernie Sanders are plotting, and that's doing the larger parts of the bill, the more bold, progressive, not necessarily physical infrastructure parts of the bill by reconciliation, including the tax increases that would go to pay for all of this. So they think, sure, they bring all of the Democrats into all these moderate Democrats to this package that they're negotiating so that they won't support reconciliation so we can kill the larger agenda. And meanwhile, we're not promising that we're going to actually give you 10 Republican votes on this other package. So we kill reconciliation, and then we pull the rug out from under you and don't vote on this one either. That's and they're pretty much plotting that out loud on the pages of Politico.
That's nice of them to let us know. I mean, I think it was a good guess, but then it would just be us, shouting, "Oh my God, look out, they're going to pull the rug out from under you." Oh, no, they're not. But now we can say, it's not us saying it. We're not, you don't have to listen to crazy people. Listen to Politico. You love Politico.
Listen to John Thune.
Oh, wait. Well, just take it right from the source. Yeah, they are being quite open these days about a lot of these things, and I guess, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't change anything, but...
It doesn't change anything. Is it just like, they are clearly, and they've said it before, out loud, with reporters, taking notes. They are using Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema as a wedge. They're using them to split Democrats apart. They're using them to stop any of Biden's agenda from passing. They say this.
Yeah.
And Manchin and Sinema still allow themselves to be used this way, thinking somehow that they've actually got power.
I guess.
In this, I don't understand, and I'm at a loss as to what to do about it, other than keep pointing out you are being played.
I guess, yeah. I don't know whether that bothers them. Obviously, not very much. Their names are in the newspaper, and these are the positions they wanted to occupy, and I guess they're just happy that there's a party that. Well, look, my party doesn't want to be where I am, but this other party does, so I don't know. I don't have to change my position. It's not me changing my mind. They're coming to me, and I can't help that. If people are attracted to my position and want to vote with me, they probably regard that as success.
Meanwhile, they're being openly
sort of
mocked.
Yeah.
There's one thing.
Wow.
Politico interviews Manchin. Who is not committal on a second infrastructure package, saying there's a lot more that needs to be done. But he declined to say whether he'd support legislation that only had Democratic votes. So then they give this quote, "You're putting words in your own mouth," Manchin said. "I'm not saying that. You're putting words in your own mouth."
Well, but that's where words are.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
They're showing the world that Joe Manchin is not very bright.
I guess. I don't know what he thought he was doing with that, but I mean...
Giving them a quote to make him look stupid, which they will happily use.
It worked. All right. Putting words in. Yeah, well, that's where words start.
I think I'm spending far too much time with Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin.
Maybe, yeah.
I think I don't like my job right now very much.
I can't blame you. But yeah, well, this is one of those things that's going to put them in the spotlight. But yeah, they are being open about that. There was, I guess, yesterday's big story, although I guess I don't really understand why it was a big story in the same way, was Mitch McConnell saying, oh yeah, I will absolutely block any Supreme Court nominations that Biden might try to get confirmed.
And I won't just do it in 2024, I'll do it in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'll do. I will try and block that from happening. And I mean, it made a story, I guess, because it was like an important person says something, but how anybody, certainly no one was surprised by that, although they didn't try to make it into a thing. Well, I thought you said that the McConnell rule was no in an election year. But then again, you violated that yourself.
Everybody at this point should know better.
Yeah, I mean, you would think.
That to pin McConnell down on a McConnell rule, because he'll always amend it.
Yeah. So anyway, but that was the big thing yesterday. But I guess now the theme is they are being quite explicit about what their plans are and how they plan to do it. And, I mean, there's not anything anybody can do about that, but at least
there's
we don't
something
have difficulty
two people can do
things.
about it, and I'm not sure how to make it happen.
Oh.
And I think that, there are others who were problematic on filibuster reform.
Yes, okay, sure, that's true.
Dianne Feinstein, who I think
right.
does not necessarily remember the interview, what she said the last time.
That's probably true.
A couple months ago she was fine on filibuster. Last week she again was not, because she's
maybe not
losing her place, I
peak.
believe.
Yeah, okay.
And then there's Carper, who I think probably wouldn't be that much of a problem if Biden made an effort with him. I think Carper would probably go along.
Okay.
And then this does in large part come back to Biden.
Okay.
There really does need to be some bully pulpit kind of pressure on these two, I think.
Yeah, I guess so.
Breakthrough. I mean, they've been coddled, they've been bribed, they've been honored, feted, whatever you want to say. And I think it's time for that to end, and I think it's time for a hammer.
Okay. Well, I'm for that. I guess it's up to Joe Biden can make the call. Maybe he knows best how, what works best with him. Do I do this publicly? Do I have him over for dinner? Do I pull him aside somewhere and say, listen, or what? But those are people who would very likely respond to a direct appeal from Biden, and not just because he's the president, but the home state, the long relationships, etc. And it might work, and we'll never know if he does it quietly. The smart play, I guess, here is to say I'm prevailing upon them quietly, so that we never see it and can't.
Yeah, because you don't want to embarrass them publicly.
Right. Yeah, and you don't want to be able to point to things and say, "Aha, there it is," and then if it doesn't work, or they resist, and of course, there's also the dynamic of the story of, well, they need to appear independent. So it may very well be that the discussions is, well, listen, this is me leaning on you, and pretty soon there's going to be a public element of my leaning on you. Now, I understand you're going to want to resist and push back, but just so long as you end up where I need you, go ahead, and then that makes it impossible for us to read necessarily what's happening. He says he's still opposed, and people will get angry with Biden, and why aren't you pushing? And I can't tell you about it because it's supposed to be private, because that's the way this guy works. But he also needs to look independent of me, but don't worry, in the end he'll come around. And then, but what if he doesn't? And then all that was speculation, and it was all garbage to begin with. It's impossible to know what's happening in their heads. The only people who are saying what's going on in their heads are the Republicans. And they're wrong.
They're being very, very clear about it.
Yeah.
This is how we are manipulating you.
Amazing.
We're going to tell it to you, and you're still going to fall for it.
I don't know. Well, there's something to be said for that sort of straightforwardness, I suppose. And it is vote against it. But,
I mean, there is. Yes,
yeah.
they're being honest.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to recognize that, then I guess you deserve what you get.
I guess so. I'm not sure. But, yeah, well, we have that happening at the same time. I have read that there's some action on the very early action on the budget front, which is, I guess, so esoteric and boring that it really just hasn't gotten much coverage. But the process is beginning.
Yeah, the process is beginning. The House passed in a rule a deeming of the budget to have been passed. Is that the right way of saying it?
I guess so. That, of course, will awaken all sorts of memories for some people, but I don't know whether the Republicans, even the ones who were around to be angry at the use of the word deeming, for whatever reason, last time will remember, because now there's critical race theory.
They set their spending cap for fiscal year 2022 with a deeming resolution. They set it at $1.5 trillion.
Yes, and there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. And, I mean, a budget resolution is a resolution, and it sets caps. In other words, it deems caps to have been put in place because caps are put in place. So to use this procedure is nothing alarming or special or esoteric or weird. It, like a budget resolution, is a resolution, period.
Yeah.
So it's non-binding, so is the budget. But this, I guess,
but it does give you a number to use for divvying up the appropriations.
Yeah. Okay. So that's all it is really a notice that, okay, budget time is coming. We don't want to fall too far behind. Here's a general look at about where we would like the numbers to fall. And now you appropriators and authorizing committees know how much money will you have for your part of the budget, and start writing it. That's all it is.
Yep. Yep.
But I expect at some point people will say, deeming. And if they can distract people from critical race theory for long enough, they'll be mad about that and storm the Capitol.
They'll be mad about it. Yes. And we do have 5 Democratic blue dogs who are a little bit perturbed at the $1.5 trillion and who've written a letter to Pelosi saying, maybe some austerity, maybe we're not going to necessarily go with your $1.5 trillion. Maybe we're a problem here.
I see. Yeah, and with a narrow margin.
Or they hinting, but not really saying, but yeah, they could be a problem because she can't afford to lose 5.
Yeah. So they're non-committal about it. I guess that's a declaration that we're going to spend the next couple of weeks looking for a place where we think there's room to be contrarian. Like if it's on infrastructure, we might get bulldozed and look like jerks. But if we can somehow find out, why don't we cut $2 million from teaching critical race theory. There we go. Just savings.
There you go.
Let's just ban that. Actually, that's a great plan. Go forward and say, we demand that the Democrats lower their targets by X amount, so that they don't teach critical race theory anywhere in the Department of Transportation. You got it. You got me. You twisted my arm. You win. Go home and tell everybody you did it. I don't know. But they'll be looking for something somewhere to be budget hawks with. And
they absolutely
we're on notice. Okay.
Here's the blast from the past.
Oh.
The Iraq AUMF might actually end up being repealed.
Okay, great.
19 years after the fact.
Yes, it's a little late in coming, but yeah, okay, that's good. It's like cleaning up your code, I guess, right?
Yeah, okay. It's been a problem for 19 years that the 2002 AUMF to say, yes, you can attack Iraq has remained in effect. Mm-hmm. It would be good for it to finally be gone.
Yes. All right. What's the vehicle?
Just a thing that the House is doing this week.
This week. Oh, okay. So, all right. Any reason to believe the Senate wouldn't do it? Like Rand Paul should be okay with that, right? He's on that side, isn't he? I don't know. Maybe he's not.
You never know with Rand Paul.
Yeah.
Now he's saying that, we were never meant to be a majoritarian rule nation.
I see.
It's never been about the majority in the United States. Right. If it were, we wouldn't have had slavery.
I guess.
Is the thing he actually kind of said.
Okay. Yeah, I did hear that he was catching flack for that, and who knows what his theory really is, but probably doesn't matter a great deal because it doesn't make any sense. But all right.
Do you
so
think
this is
anybody
to look
actually
for.
ever went to him for health care? Did anybody actually got their eyes checked by Rand Paul?
I don't know, man. I guess so at some point, but
That's a
the
really
real
scary
question
thought.
is, did they go back? I guess.
Yeah.
Like you stumble in, like I don't know. He says he's an ophthalmologist, well, I don't know what he was doing, but he didn't check my eyes. Who knows? Very odd, but he can't go back to
He
that.
wanted to talk about critical race theory.
Yeah, that was weird. Didn't seem to. That's the eye chart in his exam. You're reading critical race theory documents. How dare you bring this up? All right, man. Okay, so let's see. Budget starting. We might see a repeal of AUMF, and people in Idaho are going crazy just like everyone.
We're dithering on infrastructure.
Okay.
That pretty much today.
You know what? I feel like this week is a lot like last week, except there was more critical race theory in it.
Like last week.
But I appreciate it, and I love the local angle on things, just showing that these things are happening everywhere. We'll catch up with you
Don't be
next
Idaho,
week.
people. Don't be
Yeah.
Idaho. Stop it before it gets to you.
Right. And you too, Idaho. You should do the same.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. We'll check in next week and see what has moved forward and by how much, and just lament the slow pace of things. Thanks, Joan.
You're welcome.
Talk to you then.
Talk to you next week.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, now's your chance to listen to the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. You know I would never leave myself enough time to actually preview what's going on, but that just preserves the mystery and makes you that much more interested. So stay on the edge of your seat and stay right here on Netroots Radio. We'll see you tomorrow.